Thank you for tuning in to That Saturday Show. We're actually sitting here. I'm Matthew Pettite, and this is the host of the show, Tom Dent. And we are going to be interviewing Tom today. How are you doing today, Tom?
I hope I'm okay.
Sounds like a good answer. That's all we can hope for most of the time.
I am trying to hang on for another 2 weeks before I go under the knife and have 3 of my lower vertebrae fuse so I can walk for the rest of my life instead of being in a wheelchair, and be active and be out at protests. I haven't really been out to a protest and rally in close to a year because my back has not allowed me to stand for more than 20 minutes.
Well, we'll certainly have good vibrations go in your direction that you can heal quickly and get out there and join us in the field. One of the things I wanted to ask you, I mean, you've been hosting That Saturday Show now, doing a great job at it. What's a little bit of your story?
Oh, my story goes on forever. Well, I was born in Chicago, raised in New Jersey. Our house was right next to the Lindbergh Mansion. My parents were very well off. I went to a fancy boarding school in Connecticut. They owned a house in Portugal. I lived in Portugal for a year when I was 4 years old before I came back to the United States, and had major culture shock right then at 5 years old. And it's never been the same, and America's been too noisy and crazy and foolish for me, and I've never really trusted anybody ever since I got back when I was 5 years old.
Definitely, I've heard a lot of the same story from multiple people that spending time in another country and then coming back here, or growing up in another country and coming here for the first time, is usually a shock due to a lot of the way that we have our culture established. A lot less patience, a lot less understanding, and a lot less education in a lot of areas.
Right. If anybody can afford to do that, I definitely recommend spending some time in another country and then looking at America from different angles. It's very interesting. It's very limited. It's crazy. It's as we can see from a lot of the things that are wielding control and power over us. A lot of these are still old white male-based systems, and part of working at the Peace Center is to help break down all this systematic misogyny, racism, hate, and unify as many people as possible.
So how long is it that you've been working with the Peace and Justice Center?
Well, I've been here probably since 2010. Before that, I was the canvas director for the local New Mexico Public Interest Research Group, and we're right across the little Peace and Justice Center office on Harvard, and I used to go in there and bug Judith to make copies and stuff like that, so I was aware of them back then. But I really got into them back in 2010 when I was co-coordinator of Central New Mexico Move to Amend. National Move to Amend is a group that's worked since 2009 to overturn the Citizens United decision with the United States Supreme Court, and then the McCutcheon decision, and then very recently the sort of Ted Cruz Supreme Court decision made it even easier for countries like Russia to plop $1 million on the political candidate of their choice. But we've seen, since Citizens United has not been overturned, that with the Trump administration, with all these people, popping out of nowhere with no credentials, but they have huge bank accounts, that this money can come anywhere and just basically buy our political system. And I've always been an advocate for a multi-party system. I'd rather call myself a maverick than an independent. And it's like I want to do and vote and support whoever I feel like, but the system is kind of limited with that. They're starting to move across barriers in the primary, but it's basically a militarized team sport. It's one against the other. It's the Democrats versus the Republicans. It's our team versus their team. I mean, and we can see from Washington that everything's filibustered and jammed up, and there's not enough help going to the right people. And that's what we do at the Pew Center. We try to connect people with the sources they need to connect to help them out, to help them build resumes, to help them get off the streets, to help them find opportunities to have a good life. And as I said on other shows, it's clear not only from our oil and gas consumption, but for all the militaries around the world, and all this created man-made energy has created the climate change that we're in right now, and we're in the midst of it, and we have to hold on to each other, help each other, and move forward towards a better world, towards the idea of a better world, a whole new paradigm based on renewable energy, based on peace, based on opportunities and health for family, friends, neighbors, countries.
I agree completely. Now, I've worked with you for a little while, and I agree with you wholeheartedly where we have to have a paradigm shift from this culture of us versus them, and we have to come to the realization that there's really only us. And from working with you, I've seen some of the work that you've done to progress the narrative of being inclusive, being outreach towards the community, as you had said, lifting our community up by its bootstraps and getting us on the same page of understanding, of education, to see that only through us coming together will we be able to start to make progress in a lot of the issues that we're facing today.
And I was with the Pew Center until about 2016, 2017. I was on the board for close to 3 years. I was the president of the board for a couple of years, and then I left to join the Southeast Area Community Policing Council. I've always been working with as many groups as possible in this town for police reform and to bring the Department of Justice's consent decree in and have it spelled out and operated properly. And we've seen over 8 years that not much progress has really happened at all. But we can't give up. We have to work on police reform. We have to protect our neighborhoods, especially the poor and impoverished neighborhoods and the people of color that always seem to get the short end of the stick.
Agreed. A lot of the work that I've seen you do has been geared towards, of course, minorities. You keep a super open mind with gender, sexuality, racism, all of the isms out there. I can tell you it's been a real pleasure working with you because of your open mind and your open heart. I think that we're super blessed to have you. He doesn't just do the hosting of the television show. He volunteers here heavily. I believe you also are one of the gentlemen that runs the maintenance of the facility.
I'm part of the Building and Grounds Committee, and we're always proud to announce that we have sunlight silos, we have solar panels, we've redone our insulation, we've put in AD compliant storefronts, bathrooms, doors and stuff like that, helped to design a lot of that stuff. We've got a couple of new incredible murals in the wings that are about to go up around here. As you know, we work with close to 40 groups. We have a number of different members, like many other businesses and groups around the local area. Of course, we've been hit very hard by the pandemic and have switched to Zoom and different meetings, and people are starting to come back here, renting out the halls, putting up movies, we're starting to roll again. We've got a lot of incredible ideas. We've got at least 3 direct services going on here. Please check us out. Please get involved and come to the center. Come to 202 Harvard Southeast. There are a lot of people that have been working here and volunteering longer than I have. They're great people. It's a great organization. We're starting to include local business partners. If your local business wants to be partnered with the Pew Center, please call us. Please come. Please volunteer. Please help us unite everybody in the community so we can all work towards a better future.
Well, you heard it here first. Come, stay, get involved. Thanks a lot, Tom.
So I usually have about 28 students a class. I started teaching before there was a formal college program. It was a friend of mine who's the head of the history department of the College of New Jersey. So we would teach semester-long courses. We bought the books ourselves. And then we would give them certificates, which had no academic validity, but just to say that they'd done the work. Subsequently, people organized and pushed a bill through the legislature in New Jersey that said that if college credit courses could be offered, prisons had a responsibility to make them available. The problem is, now I'm teaching actually Chekhov this fall in a supermax prison. In the supermax prison, they throw up all sorts of rules, like the students have to be shackled when they come to class. We're not allowed to teach lifers because this is what they said, because they're going to die in here anyway. So they put up impediments to keep it out. I mean, I've taught at UT, I've taught at Princeton, I find in every class that I have a core of people who are just stunningly brilliant, filled with integrity, a thirst, a hunger to learn. That's kind of why I stay in. It's really moving, and of course they never had a chance. If you're George Bush and part of the oligarchy, you get chance after chance after chance. Doesn't matter whether you go AWOL from the Air National Guard or you're addicted to cocaine or never have a job till you're 40. But in there, and the sentences are insane. I mean, I have a student, one of my best student, my only A+ last semester. He was imprisoned at the age of 14. He was charged as an adult for knifing. They kept him at 14 in the police station until 2 or 3 in the morning. He was crying. He wanted to go home. They said, just sign this, you can go home. It was a confession. He signs it. On the basis of that confession, they charge him for the crime. They hold him for 2 years as a 14-year-old boy on the upper floor of the county jail with those who have felony charges. He's convicted. He's not eligible to go before a parole board until he's 70 years old. And that last class I had with him, he waited for me. And if I would mention a book like Wolin, he would get it. That last class, he said, he waited till everyone left the class. He said, I know I'm going to die in this prison, but I work as hard as I can so that one day I can be a teacher like you. It is so powerful. I helped them write a play a year ago. We were reading drama. I teach something different every time. It's kind of more work, but more interesting. So I was teaching August Wilson and Amira Baraka. And I said, okay, every week we're going to write a scene. And so I got that first week back, and I had 28 papers, and those papers always have that kind of musty smell of the prison. I'm reading through, I hit one that's brilliant. I read a couple, and I had 4 or 5 incredibly talented writers. And that went on for a couple weeks, and my wife, who's an actress, went to Juilliard, Canadian, from Scarborough, although she says she's from Toronto. I said, I think I might be able to do something with this. And so I was supposed to be writing Wages of Rebellion. I didn't tell this to my publisher. I dropped the book. And I could only add another class each week by telling the prison authorities that certain members of my class needed remedial help. So I just submitted the whole class. I remember telling the class, they said, okay, well, we've got another night. I've submitted. They said, how many of us? I said, all of you, which kind of pissed off the really good students. But we wrote that play over 4 months, which will be performed in New York next year, and it was all autobiographical. And I would give assignments. So one week I said, I want you just to write a dialogue with your mother. Just remember a moment when you were sitting quietly with your mother. And one of my students came up and said, well, what if we're a product of rape? And I said, well, Timmy, that's what you have to write, which ended up being incorporated into the play. And it's the scene of where he's in a car in Paterson, New Jersey with his half-brother. They're pulled over by the police. There's a weapon in the car. And it belongs to his half-brother. If nobody claims the weapon, they're all charged with weapons possession. So Timmy says, it's mine. And what he related was the phone call to his mother from the jail. that says, it doesn't matter, Ma, I was never supposed to be here anyway, and you have the son you love. And that's why I'm in the prison. Yeah, I mean, it just breaks my heart, what we've done. And of course, it's a business, like everything. These bodies are worth nothing on the streets of our cities, but put them in cages and they can generate $40,000 or $50,000 a year for prison contractors and for-profit phone companies and for-profit commissary companies. And they don't give you shoes when you come into New Jersey. You got to buy them for $45. You only earn $28 a month in prison. I mean, and the phone rates are 4 to 5 times what they are for us, which makes me particularly angry because for children, this is the only connection they have with incarcerated parents. I mean, it is so sick. And in a way, you've got to go into these communities where people are completely vulnerable to understand how predatory and evil these corporations are, which is very much why Sacco and I spent 2 years in sacrifice zones around the country, because we said, look, we've all become one big sacrifice zone. And you better look at what they've done to the weak and the poor and the forgotten, because that's what they're going to do to the rest of us. Nothing's going to stop them unless we stop them.
I have a show on Channel 27, and in 2 weeks, the Unoccupied movement is going to be on the show, talking about what their Indian people and their allies are going to be on the show, talking about unoccupying Albuquerque.
Decolonize, right.
That's it. Thank you.
When?
He's got all the good words. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What did you say?
Well, for me, it really gave me the inspiration to change myself by administering real sovereignty. When I went in there, I was at the age of 13. I went in there with my grandmother, Cecilia Martin, Agnes Lamont, Lou Bean, Gladys Bisnet, Alan Movescamp, all the old grandmothers and grandfathers that were there. Grandpa Frank Fusco, Ed Charging Thunder, Pete Catches, Dawson Has No Horse, Mark Big Road, Billy Goodboy's House. These are people that were born in the early 1900s, late 18, and died, in the 80s. And for my part, being in the movement, I went in there alcohol and drug free. Okay? And today I still use that, promoting my own understanding through sovereignty. And so at the age of 52, sovereignty is what made me create my own independent and free Lakota driver's license. International community. Okay? And this is what I do. Going around promoting it, because the only way you're going to do sovereignty is be in sovereignty and be successful with it by acting it. Well, if you live it like I do, hey, you have nothing to lose. So being compatible in the white man's government, well, it's the simplest way to do that. And that's why we went there. And for my generation, the youth back then, hey, we're here still doing it. And for me, I'm still serving my elders and our women and our children. The havocs of what you just saw there is still going on in Pine Ridge. Last year, on March 2011, I helped our elders take over their own elder complex, and we held it for 37 days. That was a powerful stand, okay? We took any type of negative publicity you can think of, just like what we did in Wounded Knee, and I'm still in it. And I'm not ever going to put it down, Because these children here that are in here, part of this gathering today, people like Leonard made these type of sacrifices, and a lot of them, man, are gone. Bo's gone, numerous other ones are all gone. If alcohol or drugs didn't get them, hey, sickness got them. And I got to continue to keep this thing alive. Without it, then there's no tomorrow for me and my grandkids when that time comes. And I don't want to be neglected like what my elders experienced back in March of 2011. And with that, when I look at these guys that were part of it, especially Lenny, me and Lenny, we go back into the Indigenous Training Council. The first time I met Lenny was down in Strata, Oklahoma. And here's two guys still hanging on to their language. I spoke my language, Lakota, he spoke his Dene tongue. And me and him at that time, we took on a challenge for the people. And every time I go somewhere, please, you know, and it's no offense to the crowd that gathers in support of solidarity, whatever the movement can do. We sacrificed with everything that we had. And when this grandma says that, hey, food was the source, hey, man, there was times that we took off bubble gum and tree sap from the wood trees and used that. Just to chew something, just to stay afloat and healthy. Whatever we could do. And so when I look at Lenny and I, when we were in Stroud, Oklahoma, and he can verify this, I stressed this issue. When a drum is not present, man, that means that you're not inside. Your heart is no longer beating just like that drum. So any place where I go, I try to implement that. Today was a sad experience for me to see at the protest gathering for, you know, the war. Where was our people? And the only thing that I could see of Leonard was a piece of paper. That offended me. So now I'm telling you that. Don't do this no more. If these struggles are still that you want to accomplish in the future, to live, continue freely, then act on it. Start doing it like we do. It's hard, but in the end, you will win. And we did win in 1973. And that's how you bring change. And my driver's license is a prime example. Sovereignty is alive and well. And in 1973, that's what we declared. So with that, remember, any type of gathering that you do, whether it's for Leonard or the American Indian Movement, hey, honor them with their songs. And give that conviction back to the women and children that went in there alcohol and drug free. Hokahe!
Would you like to contribute too, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Bernie Peoples. I'm a Lakota. And I went back to South Dakota. I left there after I got out of the Army. I left there in 1965. Went on relocation, and I went back there after, in 1971, I went back to Pine Ridge, actually. And I gave up a music career because I knew that nothing was being done back there to change things. So I decided I was going back and I was going to on my own change it. I get back there and look around and it's just desolation, you know, there's nothing you can do. Once you get there and you start looking around, you know what's there. And so I really didn't have an idea of what to do. And so I left there, I went to Rapid City, just a city a few miles away. And I stayed there for a little while, and then I went to Denver and met up with Vernon and a bunch of people over there, American Indian Movement. And then I went back to South Dakota again, and there still wasn't anything going on, you know, just living in the city there. And while I was there, you know, I did discover one thing that probably a lot of you don't know. There's a document, and its title is Dialogue and Description of Events Surrounding the Signing of the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. That was the treaty that started all this Wounded Knee stuff. And it still goes on today. This document describes how they signed this treaty. And what they did at this treaty was the U.S. government brought in a wagon full of barrels and cases of whiskey, and they got all the Lakota signers drunk. They got them all drunk. Some of them passed out. Some of them were, couldn't stand up, didn't know what was going on. And they drug them up to the table physically, stuck pens in their hands, and signed this treaty for them. And so this treaty that you all probably sometimes hear about is not a valid treaty. It doesn't even exist. And they talk about violations of the treaty. Well, yeah, they're all violations. I mean, they violated every aspect of it. But the fact is, this treaty is invalid. That territory of that treaty boundary all belongs to the Lakota. That's our territory. We should be in control of it, the jurisdiction, the resources, everything. And until that reverts back to the control of the Lakota, the United States government, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't know what to tell you about that. Now, that document exists somewhere. I had it in my possession. I took it. I gave it to Chief Woolsgrove, the one you saw in the video. And mysteriously, his house burned down. Okay, well, I don't know what happened there. And the book went with it. And I've tried to locate this document through the Freedom of Information Act, through the Library of Congress, archives and everything, and they will not even reply to me. So I don't know where this document is, but it's a valid piece of actual physical evidence. This was a reporter commissioned by the U.S. government to report on what took place at this treaty signing. When I read that document, I couldn't understand why they would even let this document be a public record. And in 1971, it was on display in the library, University Library, in a locked glass case. The day I went in there to look at it, it was unlocked. There. Anyway, I got this book and I took it, and I took it to the treaty people. And so since that day forward, it's never been on display again. I don't know if anybody has ever seen this thing except me. And so, this thing is still ongoing with this case for the Lakota Treaty, and at some point this has got to come out where this document's got to be found and contested, and so I don't know how or when or why, but it's an ongoing thing right now. And right now, Janu Bagluhamani is going to be one of the main leaders of this movement to do this, to carry this treaty forward, and this treaty issue. And so it's not, not near dead at all, this whole issue. I'm doing what I can to contribute to it and do whatever I can to, move it forward. But I'm not back in South Dakota right now. I'm stuck right here, kind of an exile, refugee, you might say. I would like to be back there, and if anybody threatens the Lakota, I'm going to be there. And so, that was, an incident leading up to Wounded Knee that I just wanted to bring out, to your attention, that hasn't been brought out before, needs to be brought out. And after that happened, we went into Wounded Knee, and I was hoping that Russ and Dennis and everybody was going to carry this forward and, regain independence for the Lakota. It didn't work out that way. But we aren't done yet, I don't think. So, I've probably got more to say than you've got time to listen to. But I just want to leave you with that and give that to you. you on, and it was an honor for me to be in Wounded Knee, to be with the American Indian Movement, and you never forget those things. I'll just leave you with that.
Thank you.
That's right, come on, dancer. Come on, everybody. Oh, yeah. I said, hey, baby, where'd you stay last time? I saw you walking by. You were talking right. And I know the old man from an old friend of mine. Well, hey, baby, can you show me a good time? 'Cause I just wanna dance, honey, dance my way. I just wanna dance, sweetheart, honey, dance night away. Oh, come home to me. Said if you see my dog, he'll come home to me. I was playing some guitar somewhere in the north, and you know what I mean? Well, hey baby, I just came for one reason. You know what she said? Come on, everybody. 'Cause I just wanna dance. Dance the night away. I just wanna dance away. Dance the night away. Just dance. Dance the night away. I just wanna dance the night. Thank you, everybody.
Right now, in your neck of the woods, is the Summit of the Americas, which is one of these fake democracy conferences. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is speaking at this conference. So there was a little hubbubaloo, I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, where Abby Martin, as well as others, confronted Secretary of State Anthony Blinken on, I guess, the selective enforcement of democracy that is the United Corporations of America. Let's first look at Abby, of course, with Empire Files, who does amazing work. She confronted Mr. Blinken on, the Israeli soldiers executing a Palestinian American journalist, as well as other things.
Secretary Blinken, what about Shireen Abu
We're gonna let our
Akleh?
panel
She
go
was
ahead and get
murdered
started.
by Israeli forces, right? CNN just agreed to this. These are your two greatest allies in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and Israel. They have murdered American journalists, and there have been absolutely no repercussions. And you're sitting up here talking about the freedom of press and democracy. The United States is denying sovereignty to tens of millions of people around the world with draconian sanctions for electing leaders that you do not like. Why is there no accountability for Israel or Saudi Arabia for murdering journalists? It is one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a journalist in Palestine.
I deplore the loss of Shireen. She was a remarkable journalist, an American citizen, as you all know. And there too, we are determined to follow the facts and get to the truth
Facts
of
have
what
been
happened.
found, Secretary Blinken,
No,
with all due
they have not
respect.
been- no,
with all
they-
due
I'm sorry,
respect,
with
it is
respect, they have not yet
conclusive.
been established.
Yes,
We're
that
looking
has.
no, they have not. If we were looking for an independent, credible investigation, when that investigation happens, we will follow the facts wherever they lead. It's as straightforward as that. That has not yet happened, but it's something that we very much want to see happen.
And we'll have time after
Thank
the
you.
panel, of course, to
Thank
talk
you.
more about.
Credit to her.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
We're
and-
listen. We're gonna wait until you guys forget about this and continue doing nothing. That's what he means by they're waiting for an investigation.
Right.
We're gonna wait this cycle out.
And by the way,
Gore Vidal said it. We're the United States of Amnesia, and that's what people count on.
By the way, what Abby was referring to, Colin, if you have it, CNN, which I don't get to say this often, but credit to them, they investigated and they concluded they were shooting directly at the journalist. New evidence suggests Shireen Abu Akleh was killed in targeted attack by Israeli forces. So that's from CNN. no bastion of,
Yeah, but when even they come around to something, it's like, okay,
right.
How much,
And by the way, putting aside who killed her, which, I mean, not just CNN, but what's that terrible place?
It could be a lot of places.
Starts with a B. It's one of those think tanky. I forget. But even CNN, who did this, putting aside who killed her, I mean, there's video of Israel basically like invading her home during her funeral, taking down Palestinian, the IDF soldiers, to be clear. I said Israel, taking down Palestinian flags, this and that. I mean, that's like basically spitting on somebody's grave before they're buried. But it was so interesting.
That was disturbing to watch. I mean, it was hard to watch that. It really was.
But it's so interesting because you constantly hear this. We need an independent Well, who's going to be doing the independent investigation? The White House hot dog guy? Who's going to be doing the independent investigation that news outlets have already done? It can't be independent if Israel is involved. But apparently, from everything I've read, the United States has not said, well, Israel cannot be involved or have any say in this investigation. Which brings me to the next clip, because it's very similar. You're going to hear the word again, independent. I don't know if this was a journalist or just an activist, but confronted Secretary Blinken on the fact that how is it that Haiti is here when the president of Haiti, he's not even recognized, or he shouldn't be recognized, and it's not even clear if he assassinated his predecessor. But Haiti is here, but Cuba and Venezuela are not invited to this summit. Let's take a look at that.
I wonder how you justify the invitation of Dr. Ariel Henry from Haiti when he is actually governing with no constitutional mandate. His government has been implicated in many different crimes, including potentially the murder of the past president. Countries like Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua are being excluded from the Summit of the Americas because you deem them to not be democratic. But how can you use that as your justification when you have the so-called Prime Minister of Haiti who is ruling under no sort of democratic mandate here?
Yeah, we, like many other countries, are determined to get to the facts of what happened in Haiti, including the assassination of the previous prime minister. We're determined to find the facts wherever they lead and to whomever they lead.
But does democracy only matter if they disagree with the United States government? What is your actual basis for saying a government is undemocratic and another one can't be invited and another one that's undemocratic can be invited?
You hear the same talking points wherever the facts may lead. He said the same thing on the Israel question. And by the way, it's very interesting.
It's like the thoughts and prayers of having to answer a question.
Yes, that's a very good thing.
It's like the thought. Well, we're waiting for the facts will be where they lead. That's like the thoughts and prayers of actually answering a question.
Well, it's also interesting because they can't seem to keep it together, whether Venezuela is a dictatorship or our friend, whether Juan Guaido is the president, who's not the president, or Maduro. A couple months ago, after the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, gas prices started to go up. This is from Washington Post. White House reaches out to Venezuela, a longtime foe amid Russia crisis. The Biden White House inched closer Monday to a modest reapproachment with oil-rich Venezuela, a bitter foe to the oppressive policies of President Nicolas Maduro, as it urgently sought ways to stave off the economic, diplomatic, and political impact of soaring gas prices that nudged over $4 a gallon. The potential thaw arrives as the White House sent a delegation to Venezuela over the weekend to discuss energy sanctions imposed by the U.S. several years ago and to address the fate of American citizens who have been jailed in the country, including 6 oil executives from Citgo. So it's very interesting. They're democratic enough for us to go visit, and let's just be clear, we're visiting them to try and get their oil, but not democratic enough to be invited to this conference. By the way, Nicaragua, who we basically destroyed that country several decades ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
By the way, how much is gas in your neck of the woods? Like $7.50?
Oh, how about? Oh, well, 6 is pretty much the average, 6-ish. Okay. But then you have a few places in California, and it's not just in LA area; it's throughout the state where it's like they're really gouging big time for whatever reason. I don't know like exactly how that works, but it's like past 9 in some places. So it's pretty crazy, man. We got to get off fossil fuels. It's over. It's time. It's time. We got to get off of it.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I just wanted the audience to see that. Credit to Abby, because you're not going to hear actual U.S. corporate journalists ever press anybody, much less the Secretary of State, on that. I'm surprised she got in the building, frankly. But that's what we need.
Because she changed her hair color. They didn't recognize her.
Might be true.
They were like, who are you? And she said, I am Gabby Martine. I work for NPR.
Absolutely.
And they're like, oh.
Absolutely.
That's my theory. I don't know. I don't quote me on that. Ask Abby or Abby. No, I did. Ask Abby directly.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Quo's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.
And let's go here. Yes, cancel student debt, bail out regular people. And this is written in other words, and it was picked up by Scheer Post. And Robert Scheer, I don't know if you know, he's the former editor of the New York Times. He was Chris Hedges' boss, I believe. And he still picks up Hedges articles and Lee Camp articles and excellent stuff. It's really just a WordPress site that republishes a lot of other stuff.
I think they had Caitlin the other day.
Right? Yep. They republished Caitlin stuff, Common Dreams.
Yeah.
You know, he's excellent. Robert Scheer's great stuff. And once in a while he writes himself. So he picked up this Robert Alvarez from Other Words, who works at the Institute for Policy Studies. All right. And what Robert is saying here is he borrowed money to pay for college, like 45 million other Americans who did the same. He owes student loan debt. Our generation was sold a pipe dream about what a degree could mean for our future. Wanted so badly for this dream to come true that leapt at the opportunity to take out loans. What he didn't know then was just how much the cost of higher education was soaring and that colleges were hiking prices to take advantage of the federal government's willingness to help poor and low-income students like him cover tuition. Talking to his college counselor about how she paid $240 a year to attend one of the best universities in his home state. Since that counselor attended college, inflation has risen 645%, but tuition at college she attended has risen 11,820%. How did they pay for college? Yeah, I worked a part-time summer job after school, and I did that too. You know what? You know where that money went to? Rent, gas, and bills. Right, my McDonald's job was barely enough to keep me afloat, let alone pay for my tuition and other expenses. It was either take out student loans or drop out of college, and I chose not to drop out. Graduated and eventually got a job in my field, but with the rising cost of housing and everything else, that loan debt, which is already inflated by skyrocketing college costs, now feels suffocating. It prevents him from qualifying for a good mortgage loan and makes second guess whether he can even afford to have children. I mean, you've got an entire generation of people that are thinking this way. His loan is just a tiny fraction of the national student loan debt. Again, $1.7 trillion that loan borrowers owe is a massive policy problem affecting everything from housing to the job market to retirement savings and so much more. And that's why there's a growing movement on the federal government, calling on the federal government to relieve some or all of this debt. If they canceled $50,000 worth of student loans, it would give 36 million borrowers a new lease on life. It could enable
all of it.
Right. Okay. And that's the Elizabeth Warren plan. It could enable them to buy a house, start a family, or open a business. That's very nice. Now, it sounds like a radical idea to cancel up to $50,000 worth of student loan debt. It's just not. If you'll remember, Donald Trump and the Republicans, right, passed a $1.9 trillion high-end tax cut 2017 that's been called socialism for the rich. Billionaires paying a lower average tax rate than the working class for the first time in U.S. history. directly responsible for corporate tax revenues plunging to near record lows. So, that sounds like a lot more radical, right, than helping regular people. Even writing off every penny of student debt would cost less than Trump's tax cuts for corporations and the rich. And that's cumulative forever versus that 1.9 trillion, which was not cumulative forever. That had time limits to it in a lot of cases. Biden expressed interest in forgiving some student loan debt, although he's indicated it may not be more than $10,000. I'd welcome any amount being knocked off my loan, but I fear if Biden cancels only $10,000, he would fumble an enormous opportunity to improve millions of lives and give the economy a desperately needed shot in the arm. Precedent is there. The U.S. has a long history of economic bailouts dating back to 1792. The benefits are there. Studies show forgiving student loan debt would create jobs, grow the economy, and have the added benefits of helping to narrow the racial and gender wealth gaps. And maybe that's why it's not happening. And importantly, student debt forgiveness has broad public support, including among people without a college degree and without student loan debt, as well as young people. The question is, what do you do then? How do you pay for all this? How do you fund it all? Well, it's time for the federal government to bail the people out. It's time to cancel student loans.
Don't even have to pay for it. We can just do it.
How do you pay for it?
Yeah, but cancel it. You can just flip the switch.
But moving forward, you got to pay. Yeah, but you got to pay teacher salaries. You got to pay everybody's salaries. You got to pay to maintain buildings. You have to pay for. How do you pay for all that? I don't have the answer. I don't know. I don't know. But other countries manage. They fund it, but they fund it through the government. The government pays for it. What would Ed say?
Right. We just print it. Print a sign that says, "You do whatever you need to. Go to the money printer, get what you need."
Yeah, money printer go brr. Yeah, that's exactly what Eric just said too. Yeah, until you can't continue to print anymore. Like I guess you always can, but
yeah,
that's not a bad idea. The Borg, and resistance is futile over on the Rockfin. Why not 2 years of community service? Biden wants 2 years of active enlisted service to relieve student loans. I'd be down with 2 years of community service to relieve student loans.
That's seeing as if they're physically able and or like.
Well, there's you're talking about physical community service. There's answering phones. There's doing all kinds of things that you can do that are not.
Yeah.
That are administrative level jobs, work to support and contribute.
It depends on who deems community service.
Sure.
So
okay, it could be helping.
We could take. I don't know. How about we not send $40 billion to Ukraine, and that should do it.
I'd love to not send $54 billion to Ukraine.
Right, for at least I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, how long do you want to fund it? Like, if you want it to be like that, like, how long you want it to be on the, to me, it should be a forever thing. Like, we just fund that now. That's now part of the government funding, but,
yeah, but
I would like to take a lot of that out of the military and put it into, our education system.
I'm with you now. I'm with you now.
We turn now to Democratic Congressmember Lucy McBath of Georgia. During a recent meeting of the House Judiciary Committee, she shared her personal story about accessing reproductive care.
Like so many women in America, for years, I struggled to get pregnant. My husband and I, we tried everything that we could do to start a family of our own, and finally, we were successful. I had never been so happy, and I prayed for this moment for so many years. I wanted to tell everyone, I just wanted to shout it from all of the mountaintops. For weeks, I began to dream about our life and our future together. And then one day, I woke up covered in blood. And it's hard to describe the agony of a miscarriage. It's heartbreak, it's helplessness, it's pain, and it's profound sadness. Millions of women suffer from them, and I've heard from many who felt guilty like I did, who felt as though that we weren't worthy of having a child. Those are the same feelings that crept through my mind, and every time I've had these difficult discussions with other women, I remind them that they are strong and that they are powerful beyond measure, and that their worth is far more than their ability to procreate. However, it seems those in support of this ruling disagree. After my second miscarriage, I wondered in my grief again if God had decided I was never meant to be a mother. So when I finally got pregnant again, I was overjoyed. It was as if I believed that God was giving me and my husband, finally, he had a plan for us to be parents. But after 4 months, while feeling terror and trauma in my heart, I was rushed to the emergency room. There with my doctor and my husband, I learned that I had suffered a fetal demise, or a stillbirth. There again, I was filled with anguish and sorrow and guilt, and I tried so hard, and still I felt like I failed trying to be a mother. My doctor thought it would be better and safer to end the pregnancy naturally, without the medicines so commonly used. So for 2 weeks, I carried my dead fetus and waited for me to go into labor. For 2 weeks, people passed me on the street, telling me how beautiful I looked, asking how far along I was, and saying that they were so excited for me and my future with my child. For 2 weeks, I carried a lost pregnancy and the torment that comes with it. I never went into labor on my own. When my doctor finally induced me, I faced the pain of labor without hope for a living child. This is my story. It's uniquely my story. And yet, it's not so unique. Millions of women in America, women in this room, women at your homes, and women you love and cherish have suffered a miscarriage. And so I ask, on behalf of these women, after which failed pregnancy should I have been imprisoned? Would it have been after the first miscarriage? After doctors used what would be an illegal drug to abort the lost fetus? Would you have put me in jail after the second miscarriage? Perhaps that would have been the time. Forced to reflect in confinement at the guilt I felt, the guilt that so many women feel after losing their pregnancies. Or would you have put me behind bars after my stillbirth? After I was forced to carry a dead fetus for weeks, after asking God if I was ever going to be able to raise a child. And I asked because the same medicine used to treat my failed pregnancies is the same medicine states like Texas would make illegal. I ask because if Alabama makes abortion murder, does it make miscarriage manslaughter? I ask because I want to know if the next woman who has a miscarriage at 3 months, if she will be forced to carry her dead fetus to term. So for the women in your life whose stories you do not know, for the women across the country whose lives you may not understand, and for the women in America who have gone through things you simply cannot comprehend, I say to you this: women's rights are human rights. Reproductive health care is health care. And medical decisions should be made by women and those that they trust, not politicians and officials. We have a choice. We can be the nation that rolls back the clock, that rolls back the rights of women, and that strips them of their very liberty. Or we can be the nation of choice, the nation where every woman can make her own choice. Freedom is our right to choose.
That was Georgia Congressmember Lucy McBath. A year after her stillbirth, she gave birth to her son, Jordan Davis. In 2012, Jordan was shot dead by a white man over a dispute about loud music in a gas station on a Thanksgiving weekend in Jacksonville, Florida. Jordan was just 17 years old. Before joining Congress, Lucy McBath became a leading advocate for gun control. When we come back, we'll talk to Chase Strangio about inclusive language around pregnancy. He's the ACLU's Deputy Director for Trans Justice, and we'll look at the escalating attacks on the LGBTQ community. Stay with us.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.